Okay, so good evening from Berlin to Akko and all the other places all over the world. First of all, good evening to our second and last panel. Unfortunately, I have to inform you that Professor Riva Simon, she will not be with us today here this evening, but we have two other distinguished speakers now with us. So welcome to our second and last panel today on the Holocaust in the East. But we will also hear about Greek Jewry and ex-Yugoslavia and the Holocaust. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Yitzchak Kerem, who is a historian on Greek and Sephardic Jewry and the editor of the monthly email publication Sefarat Vecha Mizrach. For 33 years now, Professor Kerem is working at the Hebrew University, and he's also a Spiegel Research Fellow in Holocaust Studies at Bar-Ilan University. He researched extensively at Yad Vashem and also elsewhere on Greek Jewry in the Holocaust, righteous Gentiles, illegal immigration to Eretz Israel, and in recent years also on Jewish rescuers. And now, please, Professor Kerem, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Britain, as an ally in general, had a role in supporting resistance to Nazism in Greece and the Balkans. Britain supported the Greek leftist-leaning Elas partisan movement in fighting the German occupation, encouraged Jews to flee occupied Greece on illegal immigration to Eretz Israel, and Greek soldiers, including Greek Jewish soldiers and officers, to go to Egypt and the Middle East as part of the Greek army of exile, and even fight in El Alamein and Libya against the Germans. And when the Greek and British armies were defeated in Crete in early June 1941, the Greek royal family and its entourage, including Jewish personalities and functionaries, like Minos Levi, who took from the Bank of Greece the gold reserves out of Greece, and Minister of Welfare Isidore Calamaro, all were escorted out of Greece by Egypt, to Egypt by British submarine. Britain supported a rare early combined leftist Elas royalist Aves sabotage operation in November 1942 to curb German war material via rail north of Athens and for North Africa. 4 Eretz Israel Jewish soldiers in the British Army were parachuted into Greece for the mission, including demolition officer Michael Precker, future IDF Colonel Meir Amiaz.
Excuse me, may I ask you, is there anything that you can do that we could hear you better?
I'll try, is this better?
No.
No? Do you hear me at all?
Yes.
All right, okay. Right. The operation called Harling was planned for 2 months and successfully blew up the Yorkopotamos Bridge on 26 November 1942 and isolated Germany from the railroad for 6 weeks. From the British side, the operation was overseen by Jewish intelligence officer Chris Myers and noted Philhellene Chris Woodhouse. Britain also made the fatal mistake, which it never admitted or repented. When the Jews of Crete were deported in May 1944 en route to Auschwitz via Piraeus, south of the island of Santorini, the British Navy torpedoed the German Tanais freighter carrying some 265 Jews from Chania, Rethymnon, and Heraklion, as well as Italian prisoner of war soldiers. Mistakenly, the British detected the German boat and did not know it was carrying Jews en route to deportation and Italian prisoners of war. Until this day, the Imperial War Museum does not want to commemorate the act, and the British government has not expressed formal admission or desire to award compensation or commemorate the death of the Cretan Jewish community. Germany likewise has avoided recognition and compensation. British appeasement to Palestinian opposition to Jewish migration and curtailing immigration certificates to 15,000 annually exacerbated illegal immigration. In the Balkans, noted illegal immigration voyages and calamities were the Struma boat in Istanbul, and it's being torpedoed by a Russian submarine in the Black Sea, and the Salvatore boat leaving Bulgaria in December 1940 with Central European refugees and some Bulgarian Jews. The boat was a victim of vicious winds, was shipwrecked, landed on the rocks, split in half, and sunk, and 202 of 325 refugees died. In December 1940, the Salvatore, a small Bulgarian schooner, formerly called Tsar Krum, left Burgas with 327 refugees. On December 12th, the Salvador was wrecked in a violent storm in the Sea of Marmara near Istanbul. 223 persons, including 66 children, lost their lives. The survivors were taken to Istanbul. 125 survivors were deported back to Bulgaria, and the remaining 70 left on the Darien boat. In Bulgaria during World War II, private Jewish tour operators, organized illegal immigration boats. That's another topic I don't have enough time to talk about, but all that was because obviously it's a British blockade access of Jews to Eretz Israel. On September 1939, the Nomi Yulia, sailing from Sulina in Romania, was 1,130 Jewish refugees from Europe on board, was intercepted in the Mediterranean by a British warship and forced to Haifa port. Fearing that they would be sent back, the illegal immigrants engaged in passive resistance. The British authorities brought them ashore and held them in a detention camp. They were released a month later. On 18 May 1940, the old Italian paddle steamer, the Pencho, sailed from Bratislava with 514 passengers, mostly Beitar members. The Pencho sailed down the Danube to the Black Sea and into the Aegean Sea. On 9 October, her engines failed, and she was wrecked off Mytilene in the Italian-ruled Dodecanese Islands. The Italians rescued the passengers and took them to Rhodes. All but 2 were placed in an internment camp in Faramonte di Tarsia in southern Italy. They were held there until the Allied forces liberated the area in September 1943. In October 1940, a large group of refugees were allowed to leave Vienna. The exodus was organized by Berthold Storfer, a Jewish businessman who worked under Adolf Eichmann. They took 4 riverboats, the Uranus, the Schönbrunn, Ilios, and Milk, down the Danube River to Romania, where the Iranian passengers, about 1,000, boarded the Pacific and sailed on 11 October 1940. They arrived at Haifa on the 1st of November, followed by the Milos. The British transferred all the immigrants to the French liner SS Patria to take them to internment to Mauritius. To stop the Patria from sailing, the Haganah smuggled a bomb aboard. The explosion holed her side, capsized her, and killed 267 people. The British, by order of Winston Churchill, allowed the survivors to remain in Palestine. On 11 December 1941, the Struma sailed from Constanza carrying 760, somewhere between 760 and 790 refugees. 3 days later, she reached Istanbul, where Turkey detained her and her passengers for 10 weeks. Britain pressured Turkey not to let the boat go through the straits and not to let the passengers land in Istanbul. On 23rd February 1942, the British authorities towed her back into the Black Sea and cast her adrift. Early the next day, the Soviet submarine SA-213 torpedoed and sank her. Between 767 and 791 people were killed, and there was only one survivor, a 19-year-old David Stoliar, who swam to shore. Seven sick and pregnant women survived because they were allowed to disembark in Istanbul. After the Struma incident, Britain was more accommodating in allowing boats carrying Holocaust refugees to pass through Turkey. Britain did not want a boat to go through the Straits and reach Eretz Israel. The Turkish government felt pressured and wanted to delay, but in the end they sent the boat back to the Black Sea. Yaakov Nir, in his study on illegal immigration from a British viewpoint, presented a very damning cover-up from the Turkish side. The Turks were afraid of an influx of illegal immigrants who would become a burden on Turkey. Regarding the sinking of the Struma, they reported that the passengers had sabotaged the boat, another Turkish deep lie that some British officials bought with pleasure, with the idea that the Turkish authorities would be obliged to keep them in Turkey. But the Turkish government declined to be forced into receiving them and therefore had the damage repaired and the ship sent back. You know that this was all a bunch of lies, but it shows a different viewpoint. On the 5th of August 1944, the boats, the Bulbul, Mefkure, and Merino sailed from Constanza carrying about 1,000 refugees between them. In the night, the Soviet submarine, the Str 215, sank the Mefkure by torpedo and shell fire, and then the machine gun survivors in the water. Between 289 and 394 refugees, plus 7 crew were aboard the Mefkure. Only the crew and 5 refugees survived. Bulbul rescued the few survivors and took them to Turkey. In World War II, the royal Greek government in exile in Egypt played only a limited role in the rescue of those Jews living in Greece under German occupation. The Greek government in exile anticipated the arrest of the Jews of Athens at the end of March 1944, but it began on 24th March 1944, and in its radio broadcast to Greece urged to protect Jews and urged Jews to escape from Nazi tyranny. It made several broadcasts, but they were of little avail. In the summer of 1942, Jewish National Fund Chairman Yaakov Chernovitz, or Tzur, tried and failed to convince the Greek diplomat and BBC announcer Dimitri Pappas of the need to broadcast news of the annihilation of the Jews in Auschwitz and warn Greek Jews of their own impending deportation. Less than a year later, on 15 March 1943, the first deportations left Salonika for Auschwitz. On 14 October 1943, Greek radio in London broadcasted a message to Greece asking that the non-Jewish population help the Jews avoid deportation. The Association of Greek Jewish immigrants in Tel Aviv, including the former Greek Senator Asher Malach, pressured the Jewish agency into pleading with Pappas in Cairo and the British High Commissioner in Palestine to step up broadcasts on the BBC. They also demanded the initiation of further rescue efforts. This was to no avail. At some point after the broadcast, the Greek government in exile in Cairo became cautious, growing increasingly concerned that future broadcasts would induce the Germans to retaliate against Greek Jewry. The British High Commissioner, influenced by the caution of the Greek government in Cairo and local biases against the Jewish issue, refused to take further action, simply noting that Jews trapped in Greece could rely on their fellow Greek compatriots for help. Greek illegal immigration took place once the Italian occupation in Athens was replaced by the Germans in September 1943 until August 1944. Jewish refugees fled to the Evia Peninsula and waited on the east side of the peninsula in Zakheos for fishing boats to take them to Turkey and then on to Eretz Israel via interrogation for 2 weeks in Aleppo by the British. In July 1942, when the existence of gassing in crematoria was known to the British cabinet, it was decided that any Jew under German occupation reaching Turkish shores would be given a certificate to Palestine, Eretz Israel. But the cabinet decision remained secret. Only in August 1943 did the British embassy in Ankara receive orders from London that Jews arriving in Turkey could receive a certificate to Eretz Israel. Based on this, Turkey allowed the refugees to pass through temporarily. Even in 1944, British intelligence was trying to thwart boat movements and refueling in Turkey before returning to Greece to pick up more illegal refugees. U.S. President Roosevelt sent emissary Ira Hirschman to Turkey to ensure safe passage for Jewish refugees from Greece and elsewhere from occupied Europe. In Athens, Princess Alice, mother of Prince Philip, harbored 2 Jewish families in her Central Athens apartment, and after I recommended her as a righteous Gentile in 1984, she was recognized in 1994. This is the conclusion now. Great Britain helped finance the Alas partisan movement, and as opposed to its opposition for illegal immigration, it assisted the movement of Greek Jews under Nazi German occupation to escape Greece and reach Turkey and Eretz Israel. Great Britain has never admitted responsibility for the mistaken downing of the Tanais boat carrying Cretan Jewry toward Piraeus to be deported to their death in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Great Britain, the BBC, and the Mandate Commission were reticent to make announcements in radio broadcasts to publicize endangerment to Greek Jewry at the hands of the Nazis. But they did also at times collaborate with the advocates of this type of resistance. Princess Alice as a righteous Gentile is a symbol of British rescue, however limited it was. Lastly, Martin Gilbert made a great contribution to mapping the Holocaust and Balkan Jewry and its demise at the hands of the Germans and its fascist allies in Yugoslavia and Bulgaria. Okay, now for the slides. Daniela, you want to put the first one on? Okay, next. Next. Okay. All right, you'll go through it. I just wanted to say that Martin had a very vivid knowledge and ability to map out what happened. Now, he wasn't an expert on the Balkans, but he really did captivate what happened. But since this is a scholarly conference and much has happened, it's very relevant to remark what he missed and what has advanced. Next. 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 Okay, so you see maps here, for example, of the German advance, and then what Martin highlighted were other areas in northern Yugoslavia which usually are ignored. For example, like Banat and Bachka. And there the Jews were also victims in mass. Next. Okay, so on the right, you have the Jewish communities in Bosnia on the eve of World War II. And these are small communities, but it's significant because they're hardly ever mentioned. Next. And then you have also Croatia. And now, in the Balkans, it's complicated. There are different occupations. It's hard to understand. And Martin actually showed a few of the death camps, but there wasn't enough room. I'm sure he knew about more. And also, in the aftermath, much more has been discovered. So, for example, in Belgrade, he knew about the Savas camp. But only in 1999 did I and Jenny Lebel discover a second death camp in Belgrade called Topska Veshupe. So that wouldn't have been in his map. Okay, next. Here's the Mufti. Before he was active in Bosnia, here he's in Iraq. That's a whole different issue. He also instigated the Farhud, but we're moving on. Go on. Okay, Bulgaria is something not so known. They're known for saving their own Jews, but they deported the Jews of Serbian or Yugoslavia, Macedonia on the left, and the Jews of Greek Thrace. So Martin shows how many different Jewish communities there were, and he shows the path of how they were deported. He shows that there were 3 deportation trains to Rome on the Danube River, and then from there they're taken to Treblinka. What he didn't know, for example, was there was a 4th train, and on the Karageorgi boat, the Bulgarians and the Germans sabotaged the boat. So another 1,100 Jews from the Greek Jewish communities in Thrace, Kavala and Komotini were killed in the Holocaust. This is something that the Bulgarians deny until this day, and Israel, because of apologetic populations, starting with Shamir, because of his Bulgarian wife, don't want to take account for, and Bulgaria has never been confronted with the issue of really recognizing this or reparation. Go on. So the picture on the bottom is known. On July 11th, 1942, the Jews were taken by the Nazis to register for forced labor, and they were tormented on Shabbat in the heat of the day, and then sent to forced labor. On the right, you have a map of the Jewish communities of Bulgaria. Basically, half the people were not touched, half the people were sent for forced labor. And recent research shows that Bulgarian Jews in labor camps actually died of arson provoked by the Bulgarian fascist regime. Go on. Martin talked about the train routes, and he divided it by time period, which is an interesting idea. So, for example, he talked about 10,000 Jews from Salonika being deported in the first month. And then in April, it's hyped up and there's 20,000, and he continues. This has never been done, but pictorially, he's done this in a very original way, which, especially for a layman, really points to the Holocaust, and people can envision much better what happened. Go on. So, again, Martin shows the path, and he was acute enough to know that not all the Jews from Salonika were sent to Auschwitz, but also Treblinka and Sobibor. So this was very usual that someone outside of myself or Stephen Bauman would annotate. Going on. And then here again, you have more details about deportation, about the deportation northward. For someone who knows nothing about it, it's a very strange idea. Why are people from Southern Europe being sent to Germany and Auschwitz? Now, Martin, okay, go on. He didn't pick up, for example, that the Jews in Kosovo and Pristina, he knew they were deported, but he didn't know where they deported to. So he didn't annotate that they were deported to Bergen-Belsen. Go on. Now, let's say this is the old historiography. So he knew that 300 Jews were protected in Albania. But Albania is behind the Iron Curtain for most of the time. Even when he did his map work, okay, so only much later are the Jews of Albania in the free world. Albania was like North Korea, and today we know.
Excuse me, you have 4 more minutes.
Okay, no problem. Today we know that 3,700 Jews were rescued in Albania in the Holocaust, and just for research purposes, many of them were Sephardim and Greek Jews from the region. But what's surprising is maybe the big mass of those 3,700 Jews were Jews who fled from Bessarabia in Ukraine. And when they got to Serbia and Belgrade, they discovered that if they got to Albania, they would be left alone. And next, you have more, or that's it? Is there more? Are there more slides? I don't remember. All right, that's all I want to say. So I figured I finished before the 4-minute limit, but Martin Gilbert made a great contribution by mapping all this out. It showed great insight, and it's good that we're having this commemorative conference, and especially the last session was very challenging and inspiring, and you see that the Holocaust, it's ongoing. Our understanding of the Holocaust keeps on progressing, and it's all research. Everyone persists in their own domain, and we still have a lot to learn.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Daniela, she lost the connection. She cannot connect to Zoom anymore. This is why she lost.
It doesn't matter. I think we got the gist of the
So you are finished now.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much for this inspiring lecture. And now I will introduce to you our second and last speaker for today, which is Dr. Agilolf Kesselring, who is a German-Finnish military historian with a focus on warfare history and intelligence history. Geographically on Northeastern European and Southeastern European war theaters. Dr. Kesselring is an associate professor at the Finnish National Defense University, the History of Warfare, as well as at the German Federal University for Administration on Intelligence History. He's a former active and now German reserve officer, a lieutenant colonel, and he has a PhD on Cold War NATO and Finland at Helmut Schmidt University. His second book is on secret rearmament and secret army in the 1950s. And he just finished a study on SS Brigadeführer Müller-Daas. And I learned that this is a person in charge for the dogs, for the SS and all its branches, including the entire concentration camp system. His current research project on secret armament in the 1920s and 1930s Germany and the so-called Schwarze, Black Reichswehr in cooperation with the Bundeswehr and the Center for Military History and Social Sciences. And he will speak today on the continuity and change in Wehrmacht anti-partisan warfare, the example of the 18th Mountain Army Corps in Yugoslavia, and the Arctic Karelian front. And now, Agilolf, the floor is yours.
Continuity and change in Wehrmacht anti-partisan warfare. The paper I am going to present in front of this distinguished audience, consisting of so many proven experts in Holocaust studies, is rather simple. I am not an expert in Holocaust studies. My perspective is one of a military historian. During Second World War, the 20th Mountain Army fought under different names and with changing troops in Finnish Lapland, on the right side of the outer northern flank, with the never-reached task of taking the crucial railroad connection between the Murmansk harbor in the Arctic Ocean and Leningrad under General Colonel Eduard Dietl. As I mined the archival sources at the military archives in Freiburg, Germany, on the 20th Mountain Army, also on the lower levels of army, corps, and division, I found papers containing a proposal for the commanding general for concentrating the Karelian inhabitants of Finnish-occupied East Karelia into Finnish camps, concentration camps, obviously. This is a small dossier of some 7 pages in a file of the 18th Mountain Army Corps' 3rd General Staff Officer, or 1C, 1C, the intelligence officer. So it's consisting of two letters from the 18th Mountain Army Corps to its superior level, the 20th Mountain Army Commander of the 20th Gebirgsarmee, and the protocol of a meeting of the Chief of Staff of 18th Mountain Army Corps with Finnish Lieutenant Colonel Olli Paloheimo, Chief of Staff of the East Karelian military government, dated 24th of 7th, 1942. As we know, there has not been such a thing like a deportation of all Karelian inhabitants of Finnish-occupied East Karelia into concentration camps. So we talk in a sense about contrafactual issues, the what would have happened if, an alternate path of history in a way. The German proposal is anyway noteworthy. It has been unknown to me and, as far as I can oversee it, has not been mentioned by any other scholar. But it's been more than just a crazy idea of an overloaded, frustrated 1C officer. It was the policy of an army corps, communicated to its army command and tried to be put into real, even so failed, cooperation with the highest regional occupation administration, which was run by co-belligerent Finland. This means, I think, we have a trace of something going on the operational level with political implications. But the dossier about what I'm talking is relevant also for other reasons. The first is the date of 24th of July 1942. Hitler had just paid a visit on a very short notice to Marshal Mannerheim's 75th birthday on 4th of June. This was when the Finnish government had granted to the commander-in-chief of the Finnish armed forces, Field Marshal Mannerheim, the unique title Marshal of Finland. Hitler again, on this occasion, had promoted Dietl to General Colonel. The point of the visit was to strengthen the German-Finnish ties of brotherhood in arms, but already in spring 1942, Mannerheim had disengaged the Finnish troops from the German troops, which was a first step for clearer cut in a policy of being co-belligerents against a common enemy, rather towards being an allied on only one front. Second, the involved persons. Commanding General of the 18th Mountain Corps, who started the failed initiative for deportation of the ethnic Karelian inhabitants of East Karelia, was General der Gebirgstruppe, the German three-stars general of those times, Franz Böhme. He and the staff of his army corps had been moved from Greece to Finland just in April-May 1942. Some 3 months before, and this was of course a result of the disengagement of German and Finnish troops on Finnish soil. Böhme, a former Austrian general staff officer, was not just another commanding general of a mountain army corps. He had been the one who had been put in charge of the Austrian intelligence office following the Anschluss of Austria into Greater Germany, in order to integrate it into the Greater Germany security apparatus. And this was, of course, a task for a convinced National Socialist who before had disadvantages in Republican Austria. Later, Böhme had fought his way through the Greek Metaxas line and was then used as a staff officer for the occupation administration in Greece. From 9th of October 1941, and this date is relevant, until 7th of December 1941, Böhme and his core staff took over from the Befehlshaber Serbien and was then called Bevollmächtigter Kommandierender General in Serbien, so plenipotentiary commanding general in Serbia. Civil government was conducted in those days by the collaboration government, a former chief of the Yugoslavian General Staff and former war minister of Yugoslavia, Milan Nedic, who was in charge as prime minister then since 29th of August 1941. And Nedic later committed suicide when indicted by the Tito regime on 5th of February 1946 by jumping from a window of his Belgrade prison. Böhme was indicted in the so-called hostage trial, United States versus Wilhelm List et alia, and he committed also suicide by jumping from a window in Nuremberg on 30th of May 1947. Böhme's chief of staff, so, was Colonel Max Pemsel, who became later Wehrmacht General Lieutenant and made his way into the West German Bundeswehr, where he served as commanding general of the Second Corps. On the Finnish side again, the documents mention Olli Paloheimo, with whom Pemsel negotiated. He became, about 1 year later, colonel and commander of the Finnish East Karelian military government, which reported straight to Field Marshal, or then Marshal of Finland, Mannerheim. The other Finn mentioned in the document is General Major Juhan Jewry, who was the commander of the Finnish East Karelian government at the time of the document I found. Paloheimo declined to decide about the deportation question, pointing to a near visit of Jewry in Böhme's headquarters. Another interesting point is that both Jewry and Paloheimo were so-called Jäger officers, which means they had fought as volunteers in the German-run Finnish Legion during First World War, like nearly all commanders of the Winter War. That means also that they were already major in age at those days. So they are born 1894, which is about the same age or a little bit younger than, for example, Tito is. Let me come to the context of several historical debates which make this paper more interesting. One point is, of course, the context of the Wehrmacht-Ausstellung, the Wehrmacht exhibition from 1992. In this historical debate in Germany was focused, among others, on the example of Serbia, where Böhme and its staff as plenipotentiary commanding general in Serbia during 2 months from October to November 1941, and on the 717th Infantry Division, who committed the massacres of Kraljevo and Kragujevac. Böhme was responsible for orders of taking hostages in a ratio of 1 to 100 for every killed German soldier, or Volksdeutschen, so ethnic German, and in a ratio of 1 to 50 for every wounded soldier. The massacres are well documented in the Nuremberg indictment and at Kragujevac. We have evidence that under Böhme, the ratio of 1 to 100 had not just been a number on paper, but has been executed in the field. Anyway, one main important argument of Manoschek was that the hostages murdered were selected, among others, based on National Socialist racial criteria. The other context is the interlinkage between Second World War, anti-partisan warfare, basically a military task, today known under the acronym Cohen for counterinsurgency warfare, on one hand, and mass murder based on German National Socialist racial ideology, targeting primarily on European Jews as part of the bigger picture of Shoah or Holocaust. This is well known to Holocaust researchers and military historians already since decades. Anti-partisan warfare as a pretext for genocidal mass murder on Jews and the clear connection towards Holocaust is usually attributed to the SS formations and the SD Sicherheitsdienst Einsatzgruppen. For the Böhme case in Serbia again, we have a timely coincidence with the 2 months in which Christopher Browning has seen the time for the decision on Holocaust in his book The Origins of the Final Solution, so October, November 1941. Manoschek, who had researched this Serbia case in the early 1990s, misses this point, but Browning made this point years after his dissertation was published. So I come to my conclusion. If we define the Holocaust as systematic state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million European Jews by the Nazi German regime and its allies and collaborators, then we have first to state that the contribution and guilt of the Wehrmacht per se as the institution regular army of the Third Reich has been researched and controversially discussed latest since the 1990s. Ben Shepard again has shown in his dissertation in the early 2000s that other divisions than on the same theater where the 717th Infantry Division had committed its massacres did not participate in mass shootings on the same scale as this division. Even so, they served under the same General Böhme. On October 16th at Kragujevac were shot about 2,700, in Kraljevo about 2,000 people. The numbers of the hostage trial are a little bit lower. And they have been shot by the 717th Infantry Division. They shot also Jews, perhaps for the reason of filling the numbers with other people than such of the group of the collaborating Serbs. Shooting of some about 400 Jews looks to me rather like a kind of byproduct, if I may say so, of a genocide against the Serbian population in a bitter battle against partisans. For ideological and racist reasons, the Jews were here also included. We can be sure that Böhme was an anti-Semite and more than 100% National Socialist. But anyway, in his orders, the main enemy is the Serb. I think this can be seen in the following part of an order of Böhme, where he says, streams of German blood flowed because of the treachery of the Serb, men and women. You are the avengers of this debt. A deterring example must be established for all of Serbia, on which will have the heaviest impact on the entire population. Anyone who carries out this duty in a lenient manner will be called to account regardless of rank or position and tried by military court. End of citation. I think this complete system meets the criteria of genocide, but perhaps less the common definition on Holocaust. But of course, it is very linked to it. After being transferred to Finland, then we can see that the same Böhme with the same stuff knew no other method than those used in Serbia. This method had a strong racial connotation, but Finnish authorities did not agree. And at the moment of the German file in July 1942, the question was, again, basically not about Holocaust, but about genocidal methods, now against Karelians, not against Serbs. But in difference to Serbian Nesic, Mannerheim had the possibility to decline, and he did do so. We know Finland has extradited some Jews to the Germans in very specific cases, and has been an Einsatzgruppe or Einsatzgruppen detachment engaged also in racial killings in the German-run war prison camps. This is another topic. But all this does not change the fact that Finland was the only country allied with Germany during World War II, which stuck with its own, particularly Mannerheim's worldview. There have been also, of course, National Socialist movements and National Socialists also in Finland, but there has been no Holocaust in Finland. The message here might be perhaps attitudes do anyway sometimes matter. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. So maybe I will try to read out a question for you by Glenn Segel. It's a long question. He sent an essence of his question. So I read out the longer one first. So was there any impact from, I think this is a question to Professor Kerem. Was there any impact from the conquest of the Saloni by Greece in 1912 that deprived the Jews of the Turkish protection they had enjoyed for 482 years? So, and essentially the question is Jews Salonika in 1912 and 1943, the Ottoman bias of Jews and result of Greek-German practices.
Well, all right. Well, first I'll answer, then I'll ask Agilolf a question without knowing exactly what he said. The Jews, in general, preferred Ottoman rule. Greek rule was the beginning of the end. But already in 40-41, because the Greek Jews and the Salonican Jews were in the Greek army, they became more patriotic. The problem in Salonika was the large Asia Minor refugee population from 1922. It was highly anti-Semitic. And so they boycotted the Jews. They instigated the Campbell riots in 1931, and they didn't protect the Jews. Only 2 Jewish families were rescued in the city. There was Greek elite and the partisans who tried to take the Jews to their last leftist-leaning resistance fighters in the mountains, but most people didn't want to separate. But there were maybe 800 Jews who went to the mountains. But the question's a little abstract. So, but whether they liked it or not, the Jews became Greek. Older people they spoke Judeo-Spanish. They didn't speak Greek. Younger people spoke Greek. They took Greek with a grain of salt. They had to like stomach Greece. Okay, they really didn't favor Greece. But if we look at it objectively, Greece had very positive attributes. It supported the Balfour Declaration 4 months before. Actually, England pronounced it. And they were very active in illegal immigration in the 30s, during the war, and afterward. Obviously, to outskirts of the British, but this also was patriotism. The dictator Metaxas was a patriot. He harbored refugees from Germany in his house in the outskirts of Athens. He employed them. He had a tailor, a painter, all sorts of people. And he was he was inscribed in the Golden Book of the Jewish National Fund because of money he gave for illegal immigration and his involvement. So just because he was a fascist and his movements didn't accept the Jews, that isn't the real reality. He was very pro-Jewish. He had elite friends who were Jewish. And so we can't look at the Holocaust and fascism as it appeared on the outside. I want to ask Agilolf, though. So you talk about reprisals against partisan activity. The Germans did that all throughout the Balkans and elsewhere. What's different is I think that the Jews were singled out in the reprisals. Usually they're not. They're just, if they're hiding in the village, then they also are victimized, but not as Jews, as just a mass number. Now, my question is, what was this unit? Did they fight against the British at the beginning in 1941 in Crete and the Peloponnese, or did they come later? And then in Serbia, were they active at all in executing Jews in various places? We're talking about large regions. We're talking about, obviously, that this German mountain unit were involved in heinous massacres against various populations, which we know all throughout the former Yugoslavia occurred in the Bosnian domain, in the Croatian domain, and in the Serbian domain. They're not all the same. But in other words, there's 3 different elements of, we'll call it, proto-national socialism. So who exactly were these units? And then what? Then they went off to Finland, but they did less damage?
I understood the question right. Well, what I was talking was 16th of October 1941 massacre. Can you hear me? Yeah, yes, yeah. So, 16th October 1941. And 16th of October 1941, the massacre in Serbia. We say that they start to make the anti-partisan warfare stronger, more brutal. They start with 1 to 100 under this General Böhme. When he comes to Serbia, and he comes to Serbia in beginning of October and stays there only in November. Before, what they do is they make very patients who are already there, make also brutal anti-partisan warfare. It's a completely different extension. They kill 1, 2, 3 people in one village, or sometimes they burn one village down. But there's a real news after when the new commander Böhme comes. Something, and it is of course it's just responsible for Serbia, where of course it's a different occupation system than in or in all other places of the very former Yugoslavia. And my point is, in the end, he is of course the ardent by Serb. He has been very strong in every right and orders and so on, and he cannot seen as an ardent Jewish, might also anti-Semite. We cannot see it so on, but him it seems to be very normal. If you still need people to be shot, then you will take them from the Jews. So in the end, the point what I'm making is of course is clearly genocide, Serbian population. Is it Holocaust? I don't know. It's on our definition on Holocaust. It's his first target, and his first target are Serbs, and in a way, I would say it's it looks more like Srebrenica 1995 than like our broader understanding of Holocaust. Even so, part of this who are killed, they are Jews, but they are Jews and they are killed because they are in the wrong place, and they are Jews. If they would have been in the same wrong place and would not have been Jews, they probably would not have killed. Probably also. So it's more. So it's more about the small differences, not about the big ones.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, so I think it was really interesting to see also this from the Eastern and Southern European perspective. And yes, I think it was a long afternoon. I wish you a nice evening, and we see tomorrow at, I think, 4 o'clock Israel time.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening.